The restaurant smelled like seared butter and rosemary. Candlelight caught the edges of crystal glasses, throwing small rainbows across the white tablecloth. I could hear the low murmur of conversations around us, the clink of silverware, someone laughing 2 tables over. My wife sat across from me, her hand resting near the wineglass, her fingers drumming lightly against the stem. We'd been married 16 years. This was our anniversary dinner. She reached into her purse, pulled out a manila envelope, and slid it across the table. "I think we both know this has been over for a while," she said, her voice steady, almost rehearsed. "Sign these tonight. Let's not drag this out." I looked at the envelope, then at her face. Her expression was settled, like she'd already moved past this moment weeks ago. My chest went still. Not tight, still. I didn't shout. I didn't ask why. I simply nodded and reached for the envelope. The waiter appeared at that exact moment, holding 2 plates of lamb. He froze mid-step, his eyes moving from the papers to my face to hers. What he did next wasn't planned, but it changed the trajectory of everything that followed. They were wrong about me, all of them. My name is Daniel Cross. I'm 52 years old. For the last 19 years, I've worked in municipal compliance, reviewing permits, auditing contracts, making sure the paperwork matches reality. It's unglamorous work, precise work, the kind of job people forget exists until something goes wrong. Catherine and I met at a fundraiser in 2008. She was sharp, organized, confident in rooms I found uncomfortable. We married a year later. For 16 years, we built what looked like stability. A house in a decent neighborhood, 2 cars, joint accounts, season tickets to the symphony she loved. But somewhere along the way, stability became routine, and routine became invisibility. I noticed the small things first, how she'd ask my opinion on renovations, then overrule me before I finished speaking. How she'd sigh when I suggested we stay in on weekends. How she started referring to my money when talking about her salary, but our expenses when the bills came due. At dinner parties, she'd tell stories that made me the punchline. I let it go. I let a lot go. I told myself marriage required compromise, that her frustration was temporary, that my silence was patience. But silence isn't always patience. Sometimes it's just the slow erasure of your own voice. I should have paid attention sooner. The envelope sat between us on the table. The waiter still hadn't moved. Catherine glanced up at him, annoyed. "We're fine," she said curtly. "Just leave the plates." He set them down carefully, his face unreadable. Then he looked directly at me. "Sir," he said quietly, "I don't know what's happening here, but whatever you decide tonight, make sure it's actually your decision." He walked away before either of us could respond. Catherine's jaw tightened. "How unprofessional," she muttered. I opened the envelope. Divorce petition. Drafted 3 weeks ago. Filed 2 days ago. I was being served at our anniversary dinner in a public restaurant. I scanned the financials. She wanted the house, the retirement accounts, alimony calculated at a rate that would leave me with barely enough to cover rent. There was a phrase in the settlement notes: "Respondent has demonstrated financial irresponsibility and contributed minimally to household income." I've made $73,000 a year for the last decade. She makes 92. I've paid the mortgage every month since 2015. I looked up at her. She was checking her phone, one hand holding her wineglass, completely composed. "You already filed this," I said, not a question. She nodded. I didn't want a scene. This seemed cleaner. "Cleaner than what? A conversation?" She exhaled through her nose, the way you do when a child asks an obvious question. "Daniel, we haven't had a real conversation in years. You just agree with everything. You just exist. I need someone who actually shows up." I set the papers down. My throat felt raw, but my voice stayed level. "I'll read through this. I'm not signing anything tonight." Her eyes widened slightly. She'd expected compliance. She'd gotten something else. "You're going to fight this?" she asked, and there was genuine surprise in her voice. "No," I said. I'm going to understand it first. That was the moment something inside me went quiet. I didn't go home that night. I checked into a hotel 4 blocks from the restaurant, a mid-tier chain with bland carpet and a mini fridge. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the envelope again. This time, I read every word, every clause, every financial projection. Then I opened my laptop. I pulled up our joint bank account. 6 withdrawals over the last 3 weeks, totaling $18,000, transferred to an account in her name only. I took screenshots. Then I opened our shared cloud storage, found folders I'd never noticed before, tax returns with notes I hadn't written, appraisal documents for the house with inflated repair costs, an email thread with her attorney dated back to January. It was April now. I saved everything to a separate drive. Then I called my colleague from work, a man named Greg who'd gone through his own divorce 5 years prior. "I need the name of your lawyer," I said when he answered. He didn't ask questions. He just texted a number. I didn't feel angry. I felt focused. Silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. The attorney's name was Rebecca Ortiz. Her office smelled like coffee and old leather. She listened while I walked through the timeline, the documents, the withdrawals. She took notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen moving in sharp, efficient strokes. "She filed first," Rebecca said. "That gives her a tactical advantage in court positioning. But the financial behavior you're describing, that's another story." "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Document everything. Don't engage emotionally. Don't fight via text. Don't make threats. Just comply with discovery and let me handle the strategy." I nodded. "One more thing," she said, looking up from her notes. "Expect escalation. When people realize you're not folding, they push harder." She was right. 3 days later, Catherine called. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. Her tone had shifted from composed to irritated. "I don't know what you think you're doing, Daniel, but dragging this out only makes it more expensive for both of us. Just sign the papers." I forwarded the voicemail to Rebecca. The next day, Catherine's mother called, then her sister, both with versions of the same script. "Daniel, be reasonable. Think about what's fair. Don't be vindictive." I didn't respond to any of them. I just saved the call logs. A week later, my bank sent an alert. Someone had attempted to transfer funds from our joint savings. The transaction was blocked because it required dual authorization. I checked the timestamp, 11:17 p.m. I called the bank and froze the account. Then I opened a new one in my name only and transferred my half of the balance. My phone buzzed. Catherine. I let it ring. Rebecca filed a motion for full financial disclosure. That triggered a cascade. Within 2 weeks, we had bank statements going back 5 years, credit card records, loan applications I'd never seen. Turns out Catherine had opened a line of credit using the house as collateral, $43,000, spent on what the statements called home improvement and personal expenses. I'd never seen a single invoice. Rebecca's email arrived at 6:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. Subject line, "Review attached." The attachment was a forensic accounting report. It showed a pattern. Expenses coded as joint that were solely hers. Tax deductions claimed in my name without my knowledge. A retirement account she'd rolled over into a high-fee annuity that benefited her planner, not us. "This isn't just marital dispute," Rebecca wrote. "This is financial misconduct." I sat at my kitchen table. The house was still technically ours, but Catherine had moved into her sister's condo and read the report twice. I thought about all the times she'd called me passive, uninvolved, checked out. I hadn't been checked out. I'd been deliberately kept in the dark. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. "Mr. Cross?" A woman's voice, professional. "This is Amanda from Sterling Legal. I represent Catherine Cross. We'd like to propose mediation before this goes to deposition." "Tell Ms. Cross to speak to my attorney," I said, and hung up. The quiet war had rules. I was learning to follow them. The mediation was scheduled for a Thursday morning in a conference room that smelled like air conditioning and stale coffee. Catherine arrived with her attorney, a man in his 60s with silver hair and an expensive watch. Rebecca sat beside me, her folder already open. The mediator, a retired judge named Holloway, explained the process. Voluntary, confidential, non-binding. Then he asked Catherine's attorney to present their position. They wanted the house. They wanted 70% of the retirement accounts. They wanted alimony for 8 years. Their justification was my minimal financial contribution and Catherine's career sacrifice. Rebecca didn't interrupt. She just took notes. When they finished, she slid a folder across the table. "Let's talk about contributions," she said. Inside were copies of every mortgage payment I'd made, every utility bill, every insurance premium. Alongside those were the credit card statements showing the $43,000 line of credit, and the tax documents showing deductions claimed in my name. Catherine's attorney went silent. Catherine stared at the papers, her face flushing. "This is taken out of context," she said, her voice rising. "We made decisions together." "Then why is your signature the only one on the loan application?" Rebecca asked. Silence. The mediator cleared his throat. "Miss Cross, do you have documentation showing joint authorization for these expenses?" Her attorney leaned over, whispered something. Catherine shook her head. I watched her hands. They were trembling slightly. For the first time in months, I saw something other than composed certainty. I saw fear. Rebecca continued. "My client is willing to settle. Equitable division of assets. No alimony. No assumption of undisclosed debts. Clean break." Catherine's attorney started to argue, but Catherine cut him off. "Can we have a moment?" she asked. They stepped out of the room. Rebecca looked at me. "You okay?" I nodded. I was more than okay. I was steady. When they returned, Catherine's face was different. The anger had burned off. What remained looked almost like exhaustion. Her attorney spoke first. "We'd like to counter 60-40 split, 3 years of nominal alimony. She keeps the house but assumes the full debt." Rebecca glanced at me. I shook my head. "No," I said. It was the first word I'd spoken directly in the room. Catherine looked at me. "Daniel, please. I know I handled this badly, but we can still—" "You didn't handle this badly," I said, my voice calm. "You planned this. You moved money. You filed documents. You served me at a restaurant on our anniversary because you thought the setting would keep me quiet. You were wrong." Her attorney shifted in his seat. "Mr. Cross, emotion won't—" I held up my hand. "I'm not emotional. I'm clear. You wanted me to disappear, to be the man who just signs and walks away. I almost did. But somewhere between the divorce papers and the hidden debt, I realized something. I don't owe you my silence anymore." I stood. Rebecca gathered her files. "We'll see you in court," I said, and I walked out. 3 months later, the judge ruled. 50-50 asset split. No alimony. Catherine assumed the undisclosed debt. The house was sold. I got my half of the proceeds. The gavel came down at 2:47 p.m. on a Friday. I walked out of the courthouse into clean autumn air. The sky was overcast, but the temperature was perfect, cool enough to feel awake. I stopped at a coffee shop I'd never been to before, ordered a black coffee and sat by the window. My phone buzzed, a text from Greg. "How'd it go?" "It's done," I replied. He sent back a thumbs up. I thought about the waiter from that night, the one who told me to make sure the decision was mine. I never saw him again, never got his name. But his words had planted something, a small refusal, a boundary, the beginning of clarity. That evening, I changed the locks on my new apartment, a 1-bedroom in a quiet building with good light. I deleted Catherine's contact from my phone, not out of anger, out of completion. I sat on my couch, the only furniture I'd bought so far, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not triumph, just the absence of weight. Silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's preparation. And sometimes when you stop explaining yourself to people who've already decided who you are, you finally get the space to remember who you actually were all along. I didn't feel victorious that night. I felt unburdened. There's a difference. Victory suggests you won something. What I gained was simpler. I gained my own voice back, the ability to say no, the clarity to see that compromise without respect is just slow erasure. Catherine wasn't evil. She was someone who stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as a function. And I was someone who let that happen because I confused silence with strength. We were both wrong, but only one of us was willing to admit it. If you had been in my place, would you have signed those papers that night, or would you have asked for time? Tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I know some of you are in cars between shifts. Some of you are in quiet rooms late at night. Some of you are walking this same road I walked, wondering if clarity is even possible. It is. Your presence here means more than you know. If stories like this matter to you, if they give you language for things you felt but couldn't name, subscribe. Let's keep walking this road together. Because the truth is, none of us should have to disappear to keep the peace. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is refuse to fade.